Dave and Mickey's Shiny Side Out Show number 530.
Hello.
Yes, we are listener funded, which means you can give us your money, please, 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 to keep the electricity on, please, please, please. Now that my voice has come back, excuse me, we are going to talk about the topic we have never talked about before, which is prophecy. I mean, this is the first time ever we've addressed an SA show cycle, ever in 10 years. It was never really, we never really avoided it, Dave, I don't think. We just didn't, get to it, I guess. But
we have now.
We have now, but and
never too late.
Yeah, I know, right? And the reason we have is because a lot of, because I read up on prophecies recently, and I'm sure Dave did as well. So we read up on these things, and thought, oh my goodness, this is really quite something else. I mean, oh, what about this one? This just happened. This just happened. What about this? Well, this could happen conceivably. And you're thinking, well, if one of these things are going on, then how is that possible? How is it possible that these people hundreds, I mean, maybe decades before now, or hundreds of years, or even thousands of years ago, how could they possibly even had an inkling of what is happening today? How could they possibly have an understanding of our plight, of our society, of the things that have transpired in the potentially hundreds or thousands of years since they were alive? Right? And it's a fair question. The answer is, well, there's no reasonable or rational Occam's razor-like explanation, right?
Here we go.
You love that Occam's razor. So what do you do? Well, you look at it, right? And then you have to change your worldview. You have to change the way you look at the world, and fairly significantly too, because most of us were brought up in a fairly, I guess, standardized way. Even if you're not part of Western civilization, chances are you went to school, if you were lucky enough to do so, learn to read and write, learn your math and some science and history, I'm sure, as well, right? Those are the rudimentaries, at least to a point. And then you were let loose into the world. Usually it's a cock in the machine. If you're lucky enough. I mean, you might be living in a country where you were, forced to work at an early age, or you're oppressed, or you, for whatever reason, you couldn't take advantage of any future opportunities. I mean, it's all possible, right? These things happen. But if you were lucky enough to do so, you would have a certain worldview that would have been given to you by, well, I was double dutching it, but the world, right? And the world would have given you a certain viewpoint that you would then make your own in many ways, right? That's what happens. And if somebody tried to shift you from it, you would do whatever you could to resist it, because it's uncomfortable. It is dreadfully uncomfortable to feel that way, right? Because hey, this is what I believe. You're negating my entire existence. Everything I thought I knew is no longer true. Everything I thought I had a good handle on is no longer true. I mean, well,
that's
who
the
am
spirit,
I?
Mickey.
Right?
Embrace it.
Embrace it. Who am I? What do I do? These are really uncomfortable situations. They really are really uncomfortable. But we have to change our worldview, because we're looking at these prophecies, Dave and I, right? And there they are. And again, you can poo-poo it as much as you like. Somebody, some time ago, wrote something down, right? No one is disputing that. And it happens to be quite something. And it seems to be quite accurate. So I want to start off where we finished off last time, which is Peter the Roman, the last prophecy of St. Malachi, or Malachi. And then I'll have Dave take us straight into the Hopi.
Great.
Because Dave loves the Hopi. That's what
I do. So the prophecy, the Malachi's prophecies, this is the last 10. Now, of the previous 9 we covered last week, the 10th, Mickey.
Yes. Peter the Roman. This final pope will likely be Satan. Now, this is the interpretation of these people here that put this particular text together. Taking the form of a man named Peter, who will gain a worldwide allegiance and adoration. He will be the final Antichrist, which prophecy students have long foretold. If it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived. The 112th prophecy states this. So he foresaw 112 popes.
Mm-hmm.
112, said Malachi. And this is what he says. In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will reign Petrus Romanus, who will feed his flock amid many tribulations, after which the seven-hilled city will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge the people at the end. Now, a couple of things here that stand out. One is the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church. Right? Does it mean it's the end of the Roman Church? No, it does not. It does not. What we are seeing here, though, that the seven-hilled city, which could be Rome, but there are others. Istanbul is one. Constantinople is a seven-hilled city.
What about Seven Hills?
Seven Hills, the seven. That's true. Yeah, it's in the name there, Mackie. And the dreadful judge will judge the people. Now, what does it mean? Who knows? Is it the end of time? I think not. It's the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church. The final persecution. So the final what? Someone is coming after them, right? Now, it's saying nothing about Islam. It's saying nothing about Protestants, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, Taoists, or anyone like that. It's just talking about the Catholic Church and saying here, this is the last pope. This is the last pope. Petrus Romanus, the rock of Rome. That's what it literally means. Or, Roman rock. Petrus, rock of Rome. And what can we expect? I honestly don't know. But we are living in the time, according to St. Malachi. I'm not saying this. St. Malachi is saying this. We're living in the time of the last pope. And just to refresh you, the pope before this was called the Glory of the Olive. And the order of St. Benedict has said this pope will come from the order. It is interesting that Jesus gave his apocalyptic prophecy about the end of time from the Mount of Olives. This pope will reign during the beginning of the tribulations Jesus spoke of. The 111th prophecy is Gloria Olivae, like I said, the glory of the olive. And St. Benedict himself prophesied that before the end of the world, his order, known as the Olivetans, will triumphantly lead the Catholic Church in its fight against evil. But the point is, St. Malachi correctly prophesied Pope Benedict coming from the order of, the Benedictines, which is, in my opinion, quite something. So he resigned. He abdicated, right? He actually abdicated. Now, okay, so that's St. Malachi. I think there's a lot in that for us to just, to just work through, to understand, and really, good guys and girls, we are living, according to St. Malachi, in the time of the last pope. That's where his list ends. The end of the Catholic papacy. Only of interest maybe to Catholics, but there's a billion of you guys, right? So we'll see. Now, much more interesting, because it is a lot more, evocative, I want to say. The Hopi prophecies, they really hit you right between the eyes. Why don't you take us through some of that stuff?
Absolutely. So the 9 signs of White Feather's prophecies. In the summer of 1958, a minister named David Young was driving across the Four Corners region of the US when he picked up an old Hopi man named White Feather by the side of the road. This spiritual elder of the Bear Clan, the most sacred of all the Hopi clans, confessed that all his sons were dead and that the Hopi ceremonial cycle was slowly becoming extinct. After sensing Reverend Young was trustworthy, he decided to pass along 9 primary Hopi prophecies that together would herald the destruction of the fourth world. White Feather stated that these 9 signs would mean that the fourth world was about to come to a close. He said that his ancestors had foretold the coming of all of the following events long before they arrived. Now I'll read each. Do you want to? We'll alternate, Mickey, so it's understandable for the listener. White-skinned people would take possession of the land and carry thunder sticks that strike like lightning, rifles, and pistols.
Spinning wheels with voices in them would come, whirring wagon wheels and or whining car tires, or alternatively, the spinning of records and even CDs.
Oh, yes. Huge, strange beasts would appear, looking somewhat like buffalo, but with long horns. And we know that as cattle.
Yeah, especially in Texas, you got the longhorn cattle there. Snakes of iron. Well, we do, right?
True.
Snakes of iron would spread across the land, and that's a really very poetic description of railroads, if you think about it.
Absolutely. And the way that a snake will cut through sand and leave hills, and it creates the valley, which is also very similar to the Aboriginal Dreamtime. Okay, a giant spider web would crisscross the land. Telegraph, telephone, power lines, and now the internet, the World Wide Web. It's also a description of what you see when you look up.
Yeah. Now, that's really, for me, that is a really powerful image, a giant spider web, because it is so accurate. And I mean, in the spider web, every strand is connected to every other strand.
That's right.
It's just how a spider web works, right? A spider's in the middle of it, but if anything in the net touches, or in the web, I should say, touches it, right? The spider will know immediately, because it is such a precise instrument, the spider's web, and it's very, very similar. That's why it's called the World Wide Web, right?
Yeah.
It's in the way that the internet works. This one I find really interesting, because only now does it make sense. Rivers of stone that make pictures in the sun would crisscross the Hopi land. Okay, rivers of stone. Okay, there's clearly could be streets, walkways, whatever, but that make pictures in the sun. Now, I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you've ever driven across a highway in really hot conditions in the heat, right? What you see is it's like a glimmering.
Yeah.
And it's like a mirage that appears, and in fact, it looks like there's water.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and sometimes even other pictures might appear as a mirage, but that happens a lot more on the road than it does anywhere else, because I guess the road heats up more than the surrounding landscape in most instances. But it's really amazing because that's what I mean. If you are seeing this and you don't know what it is, you put it in the words that best describe it for you.
Yeah.
Right. So you're Native American. Whenever this prophecy was made, and you're looking at you're looking at this, you get this vision, right? And you go, there was this great river of stone, because they weren't road builders, Native Americans. Not really. They didn't build roads per se, right? And this river of stone. Okay, that makes sense. River of stone. But there's these pictures that appear in the sun, specifically in the sun.
Yeah, I see.
That,
I see. You don't see them at night, only when it's sun. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it has to be hot. So it's like, to me, that this is the most compelling evidence of someone seeing something they can't necessarily comprehend, but they try to put it in the best words they can.
Yeah. For me, it's the web of contrails or chemtrails in the sky. That for me, that's what I see. And it's subjective, because it's how we've placed what we see today into these words. The other one, the ocean would turn black and all the living things in it would die. And there's an example here of the summer 2010 Gulf oil spill. That's an example.
There have been many other oil spills.
There have been, yes. But wow. Once again, remember, you can't imagine a time in history when you could describe it that way.
Yeah. And literally, I don't know if you've ever witnessed an oil spill, but if you're standing at the beach and it's a significant oil spill, it does look like the entire ocean is dead.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously it isn't, but it would appear that way.
Yeah.
It's just horrendous. And the final one here, excuse me. Well, not the final one, but the last one I want to really leave for Dave because he loves this. Young people with long hair would come to Hopi Land to learn native ways. And this best describes, of course, the counterculture revolution that started in the 60s and sort of petered out in the 70s, when a lot of people of non-Native American origin would come and seek out the wisdom of Native Americans and seek to understand their connection to the land in an effort to maybe heal the planet. I mean, funny thing is this, and some hippies still left over from the time, but most everybody else sold out, Dave. Most everybody else. And it's not a criticism, it's just, a statement of fact.
I think the name counterculture, which it kind of says that it shouldn't be in the name. It's not a promoting word for the culture at the time, say the hippie culture, rather than counterculture said it's opposite to us. It's not what we're doing, but it's from the side of the people who were doing the thing, not the side that was trying to change things. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's still that annoys me. I wanted to say the last one, and you can read your comment. So, a dwelling place in the heavens would crash to earth, thereby producing a brilliant blue star, Sakwa Sohu. The blue star Kachina would remove his mask in the village plaza during a sacred Kachina dance. After that, all Hopi ceremonies would cease entirely.
And just to put it into context, right? In January 2031, not really that far away anymore. And I still, I'll tell you something in a second. The International Space Station, the ISS, which launched in 2000 and is 365 feet, about 109 meters from end to end, will plunge into the waters of Point Nemo, an uninhabited part of the southern Pacific Ocean. I can't think of a better description than dwelling place in the heavens. It is, again, very poetic, but whenever I see dates like 2020, 2030, it feels unreal to me. When people say, 20 years ago, but people say, 30 years ago, we did this and that, I automatically think about the 1970s.
I know.
I don't know why. For some reason, I'm stuck in 2000s.
That's right.
Crazy, right? And of course, what they mean is the 1990s. And I go, no, that can't be right. 30 years ago, that means I'm old. I'm so old.
Yeah, that's it's a thing, Mackie. You can, yeah, we're old. There's a special note here. Do you want to read that one?
Yeah, sure. Again, this is in reference to the Kachina, which is the blue star Kachina, right? So Kachina is also spelled Katsinam in plural and Katsina in singular, are spirit messengers between the world of the gods and the world of humans. They are analogous to angels in the Christian religion. Well, not entirely, but I guess as close as we can get there.
Yeah. So look, I wonder what it all means. There's, everyone was stringing hopes, Mackie, on, the return of the Anunnaki or, but 3,600-year orbit. Was it an orbit? I don't know. Was it just a return date? I don't know. No one knows. And we don't know what the zero date was. We have estimations only. But, it does muddy the water somewhat. And the heavy mass object, well, that never materialized.
Not yet.
Not yet. And, we still have some DA14 and Apophis to deal with. DA14 is getting closer, but Apophis, yeah, maybe we'll see something to do with that. Maybe if it's just satellites, who knows? All right.
Well, and that's you're right though. We simply do not, right? No.
And just like the movie Don't Look Up, we won't be told.
It's not testing well, sir.
No, it's not testing well. That's right.
What? Excuse me. I'm sorry. I just find it. I don't know. This just
for me, it was like an American version of Yes, Minister.
Completely. Oh, in fact, I think absolutely 100%, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is best. Yeah.
Finger on the pulse. Best finger on the pulse movie that I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah, sure, it's mostly in jest, and you're not really riding with them, but yeah.
I like what happened right in the beginning, though, when when they have to tell the president. Are we really going to tell the president the world is coming to an end in whatever time?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I got to throw up. Remember that? That was okay. I get it. I dig it.
Yeah.
That's how you would feel. It's not good. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this, see, if you're the first to find out,
mm-hmm.
That would be just horrendous.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a good thing by any stretch.
It certainly wouldn't be easy. None of it would be easy.
No. Dreadful. Anyway.
All right. So look, I'll just intro it. You can take this one. Please. So North American Indian Prophecies by Lee Brown. Talk delivered at the 1986 Continental Indigenous Council in Tanana Valley Fairgrounds, Fairbanks, Alaska.
Okay, so 1986, everybody, okay? This is now, 40-ish almost years ago? Not quite. 30,
shush with the dates.
I know, right?
I'm old.
Because, I was buying, anyway, I was a young
I was playing video games.
I was watching my friends play video games. That's what I was doing. Because I didn't have a
brass razoo.
Yeah, I literally have nothing there. I got my C64, I think, in the year after, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, that's beside the point. There was the cycle of the mineral, the rock. There was the cycle of the plant. And now we're in the cycle of the animal, coming to the end of that and beginning the cycle of the human being. The Anthropocene, I guess. When we get into the cycle of the human being, the highest and greatest powers that we have will be released to us. They will be released from that light or soul that we carry to the mind. But right now we're coming to the end of the animal cycle, and we've investigated ourselves and learned what it is to be like an animal on this earth. At the beginning of the cycle of time, long ago, the Great Spirit came down and he made an appearance, and he gathered the peoples of this earth together. They say on an island, which is now beneath the water. And he said to the human beings, I'm going to send you to the 4 directions, and over time I'm going to change you to 4 colors. But I'm going to give you some teachings, and you will call these the original teachings. And when you come back together with each other, you will share these so that you can live and have peace on earth, and a great civilization will come about. And he said, during the cycle of time, I'm going to give each of you 2 stone tablets. When I give you those stone tablets, don't cast those upon the ground. If any of the brothers and sisters of the 4 directions and the 4 colors cast the tablets on the ground, not only will human beings have a hard time, but almost the earth itself will die. And so he gave each of us a responsibility, and we call that the guardianship. To the Indian people, the red people, he gave the guardianship of the earth. We were to learn during this cycle of time the teachings of the earth, the plants that grow from the earth, the foods that you can eat, and the herbs that are healing, so that when we came back together with the other brothers and sisters, we would share this knowledge with them. Something good was to happen on the earth. To the south, he gave the yellow race of people the guardianship of the wind. They were to learn about the sky and breathing and how to take that within ourselves for spiritual advancement. They were to share that with us at this time. To the west, he gave the black race of people the guardianship of the water. They were to learn the teachings of the water, which is the chief of the elements, being the most humble and the most powerful. When I went to the University of Washington and I learned that it was a black man that discovered blood plasma, it didn't surprise me because blood is water, and the elders already told me the black people would bring the teachings of the water. To the north, he gave the white race of people the guardianship of the fire. If you look at the center of many things, of many of the things they do, you will find the fire. They say a light bulb is the white man's fire. If you look at the center of a car, you will find a spark. If you will look at the center of the airplane and the train, you will find the fire. The fire consumes and also moves. This is why it was the white brothers and sisters who began to move up on the face of the earth and reunite us as a human family. And so, a long time passed. And the Great Spirit gave each of the four races 2 stone tablets. Ours are kept at the Hopi Reservation, Arizona, at Four Corners area on 3rd Mason. I talked to people from the black race, and their stone tablets are at the foot of Mount Kenya. They are kept by the Kikuyu tribe. I had once had the honor of presenting a sacred pipe at the Kikuyu tribe carved from the red pipe stone of Mount Kenya. I was at an Indian spiritual gathering about 15 years ago. A medicine man from the South Dakota put a beaded medicine wheel in the middle of the gathering. It had the 4 colors from the 4 directions. He asked the people, "Where is this from?" They said, "Probably Montana or South Dakota, maybe Saskatchewan." He said, "This is from Kenya." It was beaded just like ours, the same color. The stone tablets of the yellow race of people are kept by the Tibetans in Tibet. If you went straight through the Hopi reservation to the other side of the world, you would come out in Tibet. The Tibetan word for sun is the Hopi word for moon, and the Hopi word for sun is the Tibetan word for moon. The guardians of the traditions of the people of Europe are the Swiss. In Switzerland, they still have a day when each family brings out its mask. They still know the colors of the families. They still know the symbols, some of them. I went to school with some people from Switzerland at the University of Washington, and they shared this with me. Each of these 4 people happen to be people that live in the mountains.
In 1976, America had its bicentennial, celebrating 200 years of freedom. Some of the native people thought this was significant, and they carried a sacred pipe bundle from the west coast to the east coast of this land. They said that the roads of this land should either go north-south or east-west. If they went north-south, we would come together as brothers and sisters. But if they went east-west, there would be destruction, and almost the earth itself would have a hard time. So, you all know the roads went east-west. They said, then things would be lost from the east to the west and from the south to the north, and they would come back again from the west to the east and from the north to the south. So 9 years ago in 1976, from the west to the east coast of this land, from San Francisco to Washington, D.C., people carried a sacred pipe bundle by hand, on foot. My aunt had dreamt 15 years ago that people that didn't like them would throw rocks and bottles at that pipe bundle as they carried it across the land. And sure enough, that came about. But, as was in my aunt's dream, the rocks only came so close and then they dropped, and nothing touched it. When they reached the top of the Rocky Mountains, they hit a hard storm. An elderly man with long white hair, I will carry it now. They had a van that went alongside the people who were walking. He got out of the van and carried the sacred pipe bundle clear through that storm. He was so cold when he got back in the van that someone touched his hair and it fell. It means it was frozen. Yes, his hair was frozen. You have to be pretty cold for your hair to freeze, but that old man carried it through the storm because they said if they carried this bundle across the earth, the powers would begin to come back. They said a spiritual fire would be lit in the north and would come down the northwest coast of this land. When it gets to the Puget Sound, it would go inland. I think this, 9 years later, is the gathering in the north myself. That's why I came here. This is it. We have the capacity to start the spiritual fire now, here. The old people long ago saw it and foretold it, and I'm going to come to that. So we went through this cycle of time, and each of the 4 races went to their directions, and they learned their teachings. It was on Newsweek not too long ago that 8 out of 10 foods that people eat on the earth are developed here in the Western Hemisphere because that was our guardianship. To learn the teachings of the earth and the things that grow from the earth. We were given a sacred handshake to show when we came back together as brothers and sisters that we still remembered the teachings. It was indicated on the stone tablets that the Hopis had that the first brothers and sisters would come back to them, would come as turtles across the land. I suppose it means travel slowly. Meki.
They would be human beings, but they would come as turtles. So when the time came close, the Hopis were at a special village to welcome the turtles that would come across the land. And they got up in the morning and looked out at the sunrise. They looked out across the desert, and they saw the Spanish conquistadors coming, covered in armor, like turtles, across the land. So this was them. So they went out to the Spanish men, and they extended their hand, hoping for the handshake. But into the hand, the Spanish man dropped a trinket. And so word spread throughout North America that it was going to be a hard time, that maybe some of the brothers and sisters had forgotten the sacredness of all things, and all the human beings were going to suffer for this on the earth. So tribes began to send people to the mounds to have missions to try to figure out how they could survive. At that time, there were 100,000 cities in the Mississippi Valley alone, called the Mound Civilization. Cities built on great mounds. Those mounds are still there. If you ever go out to Ohio or the Mississippi Valley, there are tourist attractions now. There was 100,000 cities of native people, and they were wondering how they could survive. They began to try to learn to live off the land because they knew a hard time was going to come. They began to send people to have visions to see how we could survive this time. People came on the East Coast, and they went across this land to the east, and they were told in the prophecies that we should try to remind all the people that would come here of the sacredness of all things. If we could do that, then there would be peace on earth. But if we did not do that, when the roads went clear from east to west, and when the other races and colors of the earth had walked clear across this land, if by that time we had not come together as a human family, the Great Spirit would grab the earth with his hand and shake it. And so, if you read the treaty negotiations from Red Jacket of the Six Nations to the east coast of this land, clear to Chief Joseph and Chief Seattle, on the west coast of this land, they all said the same thing. Chief Joseph said, I accord you the right, and I hope you accord me the right, to live in this land. Always we were trying to live together, but instead of living together, you all know there was separation, there was segregation. They separated the races, they separated the Indians, and they separated the blacks. In the state of Washington, it was against the law for an Asian to marry a white person up until not too long ago. There was separation. So, when they got to the west coast of this land, the elders that were made aware of these prophecies said they would then begin to build a black ribbon. And on this black ribbon, they would move a bug. And when you begin to see this bug moving on the land, that was the sign for the first shaking of the earth. The first shaking of the earth would be so violent that this bug would be shaken off the earth and into the air, and it would begin to move and fly in the air. And by the end of the shaking, this bug will be in the air around the world. Behind it would be a trail of dirt, and eventually the whole sky of the entire earth would become dirty from these trails of dirt. And this would cause many diseases that would get more and more complicated. So the bug moving on the land, of course, it's easy to see now. In 1908, the Model T Ford was mass-produced for the first time. So the elders knew the first shaking of the earth was about to come about. That's the First World War. In the First World War, the airplane came into wide usage for the first time. That was that bug moving in the sky. And so they knew something very important would happen. There would be an attempt to make peace on Earth on the west coast of this land. And so the elders began to watch for this. They began to hear that there was going to be a League of Nations in San Francisco. So the elders gathered in Arizona around 1920 or so, and they wrote a letter to Woodrow Wilson. They asked if the Indian people could be included in the League of Nations. At the time, the United States Supreme Court had held that the reservation is a separate and semi-sovereign nation, not a part of the United States, but protected by it. This became a concern because people didn't want the reservations to become more and more separate. They didn't want them to be considered nations. So they did not write back, and the native people were left out of the League of Nations. So that circle was incomplete. In the League of Nations circle, there was the southern door, the yellow people. There was the western door, the black people. There was the northern door, the white people. But the eastern door was not attended. The elders knew that peace would not come on the earth until the circle of humanity is complete, until all the four colors sat in the circle and shared their teachings. Then peace would come on earth. Dave?
Yes. So they knew things would happen. Things would speed up a little bit. There would be a cobweb built around the earth, and people would talk across this cobweb. When this talking cobweb, the telephone, was built around the earth, a sign of life would appear in the east, but it would tilt and bring death. It would come with the sun, but the sun itself would rise one day not in the east, but in the west. So the elders said, when you see the sun rising in the east, and you see the sign of life reversed and tilted in the east, you know that the great death is to come upon the earth. And now the Great Spirit will grab the earth again in his hand and shake it, and this shaking will be the worst than the first. So the sign of life reversed and tilted, we call that the swastika. And the rising sun in the east was rising sun of Japan. These two symbols are carved in stone in Arizona. When elders saw these two flags, these were the signs that the earth was to be shaken. The worst misuse of the guardianship of the fire is called to the gourd of ashes. They said the gourd of ashes will fall from the air. It will make the people like blades of grass in the prairie fire, and things will not grow for many seasons. I saw on television not long ago that they were talking about the atomic bomb, the gourd of ashes. They said it was the best kept secret in the history of the United States. The elders wanted to speak out about it in 1920. They would have spoken about it. They would have spoken of it and foretold its coming if they could have entered into the League of Nations. The elders tried to contact President Roosevelt and ask him not to use the gourd of ashes because it would have a great effect on the earth and eventually cause even greater destruction and a third shaking of the earth, the Third World War. I'll get into that in a few minutes. So, they knew after the second shaking of the earth, when they saw the gourd of ashes fall from the sky, and then there would be an attempt to make peace on the other side of this land. And because the peace attempt on the west coast had failed, they would build a special house on the east coast of this turtle island. and all the nations and peoples of the earth would come to this house, and it would be called the house of Micah. And it would shine like the mica on the desert shines. So the elders began to see they were building the United Nations made out of glass that reflects like mica on the desert. So they knew this was the house of Micah, and all the peoples of the earth should go to it. So they met and talked about this. They said that in the 1920s they had written and they had not been responded to. So they said this time we better go to the front door of the house of Micah because things might get a lot worse. So elders representing a number of tribes, I believe, drove to New York City. When the United Nations opened, they went to the front door of the house of Micah and they said these words, I quote, "We represent the indigenous people of North America and we wish to address the nations of the earth. We're going to give you 4 days to consider whether or not we will be allowed to speak." Unquote. They retreated to one of the Six Nations reserves in New York State. The Six Nations reserves are keepers of the great law of peace of the prophet that appeared here in North America. Meki? Dagon Narida, aka
Yep.
Dagon Narida, see blah, 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 blah. And this law of peace is still recited. It takes 4 days between sunrise and noon. Each year an Indian, by memory, must recite it about this time of year. 4 days later they came back, and I believe the nations of the earth heard that the Indians had come to the door, and they voted to let the Indians in. They wanted to hear what they had to say. But the United Nations is one of 5 nations of the United Nations with a veto power, and they were still concerned because this time the native sovereignty was even stronger. And I believe they vetoed the entrance of the native people. Meki.
So then they knew other things would happen on the earth, and the United Nations would not bring peace on earth, but there would be continuing and deepening confusion. And that the little wars would get worse. So they retreated to the Six Nations Reserve, and they talked about this, and they said, the time is really getting close now, 1949. They said, we're going to divide the United States into 4 sections, and each year we're going to have a gathering. We're going to call these the White Peace Gatherings. They began to have these around 1950, and they authorized certain men to speak in English for the first time about these prophecies. One that I used to listen to many times over and over was Thomas Ben-Yakka. He's a Hopi man. I believe he's still living. He was authorized to speak in English about what was on the stone tablets, and he has dedicated his lifetime to doing this. And they began to tell us at these gatherings, they said, in your lifetime you're going to see things happen. It was strange when they said it in the 1950s and 60s, but now it seems very clear. But then it was unusual. They said, you're going to see a time in your life when men are going to become women. The Great Spirit is going to make a man on the earth. He made him a man, but this man is going to say, I know more than the Great Spirit. I'm going to change myself to be a woman. And they will even nurse children. The Great Spirit is going to make the woman on the earth. She's going to say, I know more than the Great Spirit. I want to be a man. And she will be physically a man. This sounded strange. And maybe in a vision they saw Boy George. They said, you're going to see a time in your lifetime when the human beings are going to find the blueprint that makes us. They call that now DNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid. They said they're going to cut this blueprint. They call that now genetic splicing. And they said they're going to make new animals upon the earth. And they're going to think these are going to help us. And it's going to seem like they do help us. But maybe the grandchildren and great-grandchildren are going to suffer. I don't know if you heard on the news last night in the United States now they have genetically spliced a new germ, never before released in the environment. They want to release this germ into the cotton fields of the South because they say it will rejuvenate and strengthen the cotton. They had scientists on the CBS Evening News the other night talking about it. One scientist said what the elders said in the 1950s, that this will not harm us. We've put in a lot of tests. And the other scientist said what the elders also said, no, this has never before been in the environment. We have no idea what it will do. The elders spoke of it long ago. They said it would seem harmless, but it may be able to hurt the great-grandchildren. The elders said long ago, this is what they said, quoting, they will release these things, they will use them. This is going to be released not too long from now. They are making new animals. The elders talked about this. They said, you will see new animals, and even the old animals will come back. Animals that people thought had disappeared. They will find them here and there. They'll begin to reappear, they said. And I know many of you are from tribes that also have this prophecy. And this is what it is. You're going to see a time when the eagle will fly its highest in the night, and it will land upon the moon. Some tribes say the eagle will circle the moon. Some tribes say the eagle will fly its highest in the night. And at that time, they say many of the native people will be sleeping, which symbolically means they have lost their teachings. There are some tribes that say it will be as if they're frozen. They have been through the long winter. But they say, when the eagle flies its highest in the night, that will be the first light of a new day. That will be the first thawing of spring. Of course, at the first light of a new day, if you stayed up all night, you notice it's really dark. And the first light, you want to see it, but you can't. It sneaks up on you. You want to see it change, but it's dark, and then pretty soon it's getting light before you know it. We're at that time now. The eagle has landed on the moon, 1969. When that spaceship landed, they sent back the message, the eagle has landed. Traditionally, native people from clear up in the Inuit region, they have shared with us this prophecy, clear down to the Cochechas in South America. They shared with us that they have this prophecy when they heard those first words, the eagle has landed. They knew that was the start of a new time and a new power for native people. There were absolutely nothing strong before us now. We may do anything we wish. In 1776, when the United States government printed the dollar in one claw of the eagle, if you ever noticed, there's an olive branch in this claw. They said that represented peace. The Indian elders shared with me in South Dakota that to them that represents the enslavement of black people. In the prophecies of the Six Nations, people say there will be two great uprisings by black people to free themselves. We've seen one about 1964. There will be a second, more violent one to come. I'll get back to that, what that means in a minute. In the other claw is 13 arrows. The founding fathers of the United States said that represents the 13 states. But the elders say that represents the enslavement of the native people. When the eagle landed on the moon, they decided to print a special silver dollar to commemorate that. I don't know how many of you noticed it. The original design showed the spaceship landing on the moon, but at the last minute it was changed to an actual eagle. And in the eagle's claws is the olive branch, but the arrows are gone. Dave?
The elder said, that's our prophecy. We've been released. There was one more uprising coming for the black race of people, and then they will be released. And this is also going to have an effect on native people. A good effect? There's a whole new set of prophecies from the Iroquois people about that, and I won't have time to go into that this morning. But where we're at, we're in that time now. We're between the first light of a new day and the sunrise. The sunrise is about to come, and when it comes up, everyone is going to see it. But you know how it is in the village. There's a few people that get up early, and there are some that sleep until noon. I'm probably one of those that sleeps until noon.
Hmm.
They said, when the eagle lands on the moon, the powers will begin to come back to us. As an alcoholic person, I feel that one of the greatest diseases is alcoholism. Within 7 days of the time of the eagle landing on the moon, the first native alcoholism program was started on an Apache reservation in Arizona. Within 7 days of the time of the eagle landed on the moon, the Freedom of Indian Religion Act was introduced into the United States Congress. Eventually, it was passed in November of 1978. So it was a while, 3 years, signed by President Carter, making the song that Kevin Locke, a famous Indian Baha'i, who spends his time traveling around the world sharing the North American Indian culture through dance and music, sang legal to sing in every state of the United States. It was punishable at one time to go to jail for 10 years and or $10,000 fine for singing a song or doing was that swat? I suppose. This was changed in 1978. The legislation was introduced in 1969, less than 7 days after the eagle landed on the moon. These are the physical manifestations of the spiritual prophecies that we have. So he said at this time, you're going to see see things that will speed up. The people on the earth will move faster and faster. Grandchildren will not have time for their grandparents. Parents will not have time for their children. It will seem like time is going faster and faster. Haven't we seen that, Maggie?
I know.
I know, right? The elders advised us that as things speed up, you yourself should slow down. The faster things go, the slower you go. Because there's going to come a time when the earth is going to be shaken a third time. The Great Spirit has been shaking the earth 2 times, the First and Second World Wars, to remind us that we are human family, to remind us that we should have greeted each other as brothers and sisters. We had a chance after each shaking to come together in a circle that would have brought peace on the earth, but we missed that. Tonight they were talking on the news about the sign for the third shaking of the earth. I heard it while sitting in the airport after I missed my plane. They said they're going to build what the elders called the house in the sky. In the 1950s, they talked about this. They would build a house and throw it in the sky. When you see people living in the sky on a permanent basis, you will know that the Great Spirit is about to grab the earth. This time not with one hand, but with both. Many of you of native background may have heard the spirits will warn you twice, but the third time you stand alone. We've had 2 warnings, the first 2 world wars, but now we stand alone in the third. As it says in the Baha'i writings, there will be no one protected. When this house is in the sky, the Great Spirit is going to shake the earth a third time, and whoever dropped that gourd of ashes upon them is going to drop. They say, at the time there will be villages in this land so great that when you stand in the villages you will not be able to see out. And in the prophecies, these are called villages of stone or prairies of stone. And they said the stone will grow up from the ground and you will not be able to see beyond the village. At the center of each and every one of these villages will be native people, and they will walk as hollow shells upon the prairie of stone. They said hollow shells, which means they will have lost any of their traditional understandings. They will be empty within. They said after the eagle lands on the moon, some of these people will begin to leave these prairies of stone and come home and take up some of the old ways and begin to make themselves reborn because it's a new day. But many will not. And And they said there's going to come a time when the morning sun is going to rise and this village of stone will be there, and in the evening there would just be steam coming from the ground. Meki.
There will be a steam, and in the center of many of those villages of stone, when they turn to steam, the native people will turn to steam also, because they never woke up and left the village. And this used to bother me when I was young. When I was a young man, I used to ask the elders, isn't there anything we can do? And they said, well, it's just that way that if a person does not have the spiritual eyes to see it, it's very hard to show them. Or if they don't have the ears to hear, it's very hard to speak with them. We wish that we could go get them all, but we can't. It's just that some are not going to wake up, but some will wake up. And there's the music. So next week we're going to continue with this. I think there's a lot here, everybody.
Oh boy, isn't there? There's a lot to take up. So we'll see you next week. This is the end of David Meki Shining Slide Out, episode 530. Stay tuned for Jer Bear and his awesome show, After Hours.